How we doing, friends? My name is Jesse. Welcome back, as always, to Male Nurse Mentor. As you guys saw by the title of the video today, we have a story time. So we're gonna relax. I got the beanie on, got black coffee. This is my Greece mug right here. Got this in Athens. Really cool. You can only get these cups, when you travel places. Another random thing, let me adjust this here. Boom. It's a raw video, friends. This one isn't as scripted. This video isn't scripted as much as my other ones. I just have some spark notes of the story that I want to share with you guys today, which is the journey of my nursing career. Going from high school to college to new grad to workforce to graduate student, and then sharing with you my current plan right now for my career. Like if you were to ask me, Jesse, what is it that you're working on right now, right? So I'm gonna break this whole thing down because I think it's important, because when you hear me say in my nursing videos, our career is a journey. This is what I mean by that, is by explaining the sequence of events, right? Not just staying in one specific place, but starting somewhere and kind of moving, adjusting, pivoting, adjusting again, pivoting, and before you know it, you zoom out and this is your career. So I just want to give you guys the general picture of my whole journey so far up to this point, 5 years into the workforce, but going back, starting from high school. So let's go. That's what we're doing in today's video. So if you got the time, stick around, check out the timestamps down below, and let's have fun with this one. So starting from high school, friends, right? I want to start from high school and we'll work our way up. I'll, add little title markers when we go to the next one, right? And we'll move along this video like that. So starting from high school, who was I in high school, right? Well, for me, I've already said often enough that, I initially wanted to be a police officer. That was my first choice always, being a detective. I eventually, senior year, decided to change. I just didn't want to do that. I thought of the lifestyle and the safety concerns, right, of living by being a police officer. I didn't like that. I didn't like what that meant. I didn't like what it meant to potentially have to pull the trigger on somebody and then having to go every single day into my work with an increased level of danger. I didn't like that. So at some point, I was looking up jobs, did my research, and I just knew that nursing was the one that I fit most well into, right? I just kind of fell into that one. I looked at how much they make. I looked at the time that it would take as a investment to be done with school, right? For the money that I would make. And to me, that was worth it, right? I was still helping people, which is what I wanted to do as a police officer, but now I'm doing it in a different way, in a much safer way, right? Some can argue that as a nurse, you're also in danger with, all this bacteria and all this sickness and stuff like that. You can argue that, sure. But on the grand scheme of things, it's a lot safer. So I looked at the money I'd make for the time invested and I'd be safer. And that is the choice that I made. It was a conscious, intentional decision, but that was about it. I didn't grow up wanting to be a nurse. I didn't think about it even before senior year about becoming one. It was just something that I decided to do. I was just like, if you had to look at a list of jobs and careers, I was like, okay, I'll do that one. And I chose nursing. And I remember back in high school, right when I was graduated, I was the only one in my friend group that decided to go into nursing. None of my other friends at the time thought about it, or even if they did think about it, because I told them I was gonna go do it, they didn't go and do it with me, right? If that makes sense. So it was just me. And that's when I realized that this journey was gonna be somewhat lonely, right? And isolating. And that was the start of it, right? Ever since then, it's been that way. School was that way, and as you'll see on in my career as I explain it, it'll continue to kind of be that way, especially as a male, right? Going into this profession. I've said it in a couple videos here already, right? Explaining that picture to you guys, just kind of prepping you guys for it. And a lot of you guys relate to it, which is really cool, right? We all kind of, in our own way, feel that way. It's just part of it. Let me grab a sip of coffee. So really that's the main chunk of it when it comes to thinking about my high school journey, right? I was gonna be a police officer. No, let me look at a list. I chose nursing, right? And then I signed up for classes. I guess another thing I could share, about this part is when I graduated high school, I already knew I was gonna go to a community college. I didn't have to try very hard when it came to my grades because community colleges accept everybody. So I took it pretty easy in high school and I went to a community college. At the community college, I think I went for pre-nursing as my degree, but a community college only has an associate's, right? All you can really get is an ADN degree, and they did have a nursing program there. And when you talk to the counselors at community colleges, you gotta be a little careful because they're gonna try to funnel you into their program. And I knew I wasn't gonna go to their program, So I was like, yeah, I'd listen to them, but I was like, I got bigger goals for myself. I'm gonna go to a BSN school, right? A school that has a BSN degree, like a 4-year degree. I live in California, so it was a state of California university. That was my goal. And I was gonna do whatever it took to get there. Well, what does it take to get there? It's having good grades. But as far as my chunk from high school, that was like my transition. And I think now we could talk about college. So like I was saying, in college, I went to a community college and I was starting to take all my pre-nursing classes. I tried to structure it in a way that was, very methodical. One of the things that helped me a ton was having an older sibling who went to pharmacy school, right? By her going to pharmacy school, she was able to kind of help me structure my semesters in a way that counselors sometimes do help you with, but she had firsthand experience. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is structuring your semesters in a way that you only take maybe 12 to 14 units, and within those 12 to 14, you balance out hard and easy classes. This is probably my biggest tip for you guys, especially in a nursing program, right? Or especially for those, I should say, trying to get into a nursing program. Because the priority to get into one of these programs, if it's a school that isn't lottery based, right? It's point based, is to get A's. You need to get A's. Well, what's a tip on how to get an A, Jesse, for a nursing program? It's to structure your semesters in a way that you really focus most of your energy on the hardest classes. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're finally gonna take statistics. Well, maybe statistics is stressing you out, right? You take statistics as your hard class for the semester and you fill in the rest with, maybe an elective or two, and then maybe English or a history class, right? And now take out the statistics class, right? Another example of this would be putting in anatomy in there with 2 elective classes and maybe a history class. And you have to structure your semesters this way, so that way all your focus per each semester goes into one of those big classes that you really need an A in. And well, what are the classes that you need an A in, right? Anatomy, physiology, statistics, chemistry, just to name a few. So in college, that's what I did. I did that very intentionally with the help of my sister's guidance. And I didn't really talk to the counselors very much because they weren't very helpful. I had to kind of become my own counselor. My sister helped me a lot, and eventually I kind of got the gist of it. And I would do that every semester. I was in community college for 2.5 years. I could have rushed it, could have done like 1.5 years, 2 years, but I did 2.5 years because I was structuring these semesters in ways to get an A in all these very difficult classes. And that is probably one of my biggest recommendations for you guys, because I know a lot of people trying to become a nurse, one of the biggest hindrances in this whole thing is not getting A's, right, in those classes that matter, or having a lower GPA. There's nothing that's gonna fast track you into a nursing program more than getting A's, having a very high GPA. And that's what I did, in my community college section of this journey, was I really just buckled down and focused on getting A's, which I got. I got A's in all my classes except chemistry. Chemistry I got a B. And it wasn't easy, and I'll tell you another thing, by going to community college is an A is an A, an A minus is an A is an A, as opposed to going to like a 4-year or maybe even into like the UC system in California. My understanding is they give you a certain point depending on whether it's an A minus, an A plus, but at a community college, an A is an A, which helps you again with your GPA. I didn't know that until, my girlfriend told me that. So just something to look into. I'd look into it more if someone asked me, but it's just one thing that I've heard. But another thing I think that's important to share in this college section, right, of this journey is that, again, it was a very lonely part of the journey. Once again, like the transition from high school into college, none of my friends went into nursing with me. Luckily for me, I had a male cousin, and he was also pursuing nursing. He's actually a nurse too, which is awesome. He and I and maybe like another guy would study together because we were like just a small unit that we had. And you'll realize in community college or college in general, a lot of these anatomy, physiology, chemistry classes, a lot of these science classes, a lot of these classes for nursing are going to be often populated mostly with women, right? So again, as a man, you're going to notice it's just is what it is, right? As a man, that's when you start to see that it's a lonely path if you're trying to connect with other guys, right? It's just not part of it. You're just going to have to get used to it. And that's why I created this channel, right? Just to show you there's a space here for us as well. So for college, it took me 2.5 years, right? And from there, I remember always going to the counselor to try to understand my transfer, right? My goal was ultimately to go to a 4-year nursing school. What I mean by that is like a state university, right? I wasn't gonna go to the nursing program, as a transfer student for 4 years, but I'm going to a 4-year school. Oftentimes that's what people say when you're going to get your bachelor's degree, right? You go to a 4-year bachelor's degree school, something like that. That's like my understanding of it. And then a community college is like an associate's. So when you hear me say that, a 4-year, I mean like a university, right? So in college, that's where I also took my T's. I think it's important to say, I took my T's a total of 3 times. I think the first time I scored like an 84, second time I scored an 85, and then the third time I scored an 87. And the 87 is eventually what got me in, but it did take 3 times. And I had to be very disciplined with that. I had the GPA, but the T score itself was also very important, trying to get into these nursing programs. So just keep that in mind too for yourself. I got the T's manual, I studied that, and I got the score that I wanted. If you have any specific questions on how to take the T's, you can ask me as well. I had my own strategy that towards the end, after taking it 3 times, you start to realize what kind of works. I'd share that with you guys. It's pretty simple in terms of the tips that I would recommend. Very basic things, very logistical things, but things that I wasn't, actually doing on the first 2 attempts that I did on the 3rd attempt, and it did help me the most. So again, kind of going back to when I was speaking to the counselor to figure out my transfer situation, I realized that the best way to get into a 4-year school, right, a nursing program, is applying to as many as possible. Another thing that I realized in college was because I wanted to apply to so many schools was I had to take a lot of classes for all these different schools. So I took those 2.5 years and took as many extra classes that I needed to fulfill, those requirements for as many schools. So what I mean by this is there's only, let's say, for example, there's a class, only 1 class that I needed for 1 program. I'd still take that class. So then I could apply to that 1 program. And I would do that for as many programs as I needed. I remember I would apply to programs all over California. A lot of them double dipped for the most part. Those are the same classes that were required at multiple universities, but every once in a while there's like 1 or 2 universities that required, 1 or 2 new classes. And I went ahead and did those. Also, a nice general tip is if you can take a class online, take it. especially if it's for a class that you don't really care about too much. It's always easier, in my opinion, to take it online. And I know it's now post-pandemic, so probably a lot of classes are online now, like for your prereqs, but I'd recommend taking prereqs online anytime you get, because typically those are easier, you know, low key. You got Quizlet and stuff, and you know, all those quizzes and time tests you could take from the comfort of your home, right? So might as well. So this video is getting a little longer than I thought, but hey, we're gonna roll this through. I'm gonna give you guys the journey. It's gonna have timestamps. You guys can use them down below. So that was college, community college. Now let's talk about college nursing program. When I applied initially to my nursing program, I didn't get in the first time, right? I didn't get in the second time. I got in like the third time. I remember I had applied to so many schools and getting like different rejection letters, and when I talked about getting my T's, that's why I retook my T's. But I eventually got in. I got into 2 different programs. I got into Chico State and I got into Fresno State here in California. I'll share those schools with you. I ended up going to Chico State University. And honestly, it was a really good decision. Fresno, I think, was only 2 years, but it was further away from home, like three hours away, or Chico was 2.5, and it was closer to home. So, you know, I went for Chico. And 2.5 years, I felt like it'd be spaced out better. That part probably didn't matter as much, but I just kind of like Chico better than Fresno, to be honest. I mean, if you know Fresno, no offense, but it's Fresno, California. Chico, a lot more chill, better, looks nicer, prettier, safer. But I went there, friends. I went to Chico, and it was 2.5 years that I was there. And, you know, as far as things that stood out, once again, you know, as a male, most of your classmates are female. You will be one of the few males in your class. It's actually funny because in my specific cohort, I think there was a total of like 11 guys or something like that, which was a lot. It was a lot of guys. We're all different ages, and there's a small group of guys I was, you know, mostly relating to. And we don't keep in touch that much anymore, just because I felt like we were somewhat different. We had some similarities, but maybe I'll reconnect with them at some point. But that was abnormal, right? A nursing program cohort typically does not have 11 guys. And even then, the full class was like 42 people, 11 men. I mean, the ratio, right? Way more women still. And even for my cohort, that was abnormally high. So typically there's not that many guys, maybe like 5, 6 guys in a whole program. At least that's what the instructors told us. And I fully believe it, especially hearing from other, you know, guys' experiences, you know, from having this channel. That's just how it is. It's just how it is, fellas. So I've talked about, you know, my nursing program journey, you know, enough. I've talked about first semester, second semester, and so on all these other videos. So I won't touch on that, you know, very much in this story time. But just know it took 2.5 years, and then I graduated, and we'll leave it there. So now let's talk about new grad, right? New grad. This is something I've also talked about, so I won't talk too much about this. But, you know, I graduated in December. I signed up for my NCLEX, and I took my NCLEX, I think, in February, in the 20s or something like that. I found out I passed in March. I applied, and I got my job in March. And I think my first day of employment was at the very last day or 2 of March. And that was in a county jail. And I'll talk about that more when I get into the workforce. But that transition of going from school to new grad, you know, it's almost easier. You're so used to hyper focusing on so many different areas of school, right? When you're in the nursing program, that now when you graduate, your main focus is really just to pass the NCLEX. And it makes it easy because your brain was like this, now you just focus on this, which is the NCLEX. And you know, I've made videos on this, focus on the NCLEX, pass, and then focus on getting a job, right? Take it one thing at a time again. But for me, nothing specific really stands out. You know, I just remember I had to put in the time to study as a new grad, and it really did help to just focus on the NCLEX and on the back end, think about, you know, that first job. But I really hyper focused on the NCLEX, and that helped me. I passed on my first try. I used UWorld. If you have any questions on that, reach out to me. But I also made a video on that. It's funny, I made a lot of videos about this stuff already. All right, friends. So now it's the workforce. This is the part that I think matters the most, right? This is the section of the channel that I've made a lot of videos on, right? Do you work in a hospital? Do you not work in a hospital? What do you do when you enter the workforce, right? You just passed your NCLEX, you're licensed as an RN. What do you do now? You're entering the workforce. I always say, right, I think to myself as well, entering the workforce is like entering your actual life. This is the rest of your life until you can afford to retire, right? Just to be blunt with you, you're gonna be working as a cog in the machine until you don't have to be a cog in the machine. Look at your parents, look at your parents' parents, look at everyone older around you who's a couple decades into this. This is the workforce, right? Got on a side tangent, but I'm passionate about that. It makes me feel a certain way. But if I had to do it, be in this workforce, I'll do it as a nurse, right? But from here, I think this is really where a big chunk of the story starts, right? For me, I started applying to psych facilities, prisons, county jails, all these types of areas. I didn't apply to a single hospital, to be honest. I was like, no, because even if they called me for an interview and gave me an offer, I wouldn't take it, right? That's how strongly I felt about not working in a hospital. It wasn't normal. That's not normal behavior. Everybody that I knew from my nursing program cohort actually went to go work in a hospital for the most part. No one really followed the path that I went on. And I remember asking instructors and my professors, and none of them advised me to do that. They said, go to a hospital, get your experience, even if it's for like 6 months, even if it's for a year, do that first. And I didn't listen to that. I said, nah, I'm good. I'm gonna do this instead. And I'll just take whatever comes with it. And here I am now, things are just fine, right? So that's the message I share often in my videos. But I applied. I think there's a video, was it a video or 2 videos ago, I showed you like a little clip of me going to my very first interview at a county jail. I can't remember the video, but some of you guys may have seen it. And I show you, right, a very raw look at 2019 version of me going into my interview at a county jail. And that was my very first job. I got my very first paycheck there. Maybe I'll make a video on finances at some point, as a nurse, because that's something that means a lot to me. And I stayed there for 6 months, right? At the same time that I applied for the county jail job, I also applied to other state prisons in California, right? Trying to get a state of California job. And then eventually I got a call from one of the prisons. And it actually made sense because it was actually one in that local city. And I went to the interview for that and I got hired and I was stoked. To me, county jail felt like JV, like I was in the JV league, right, of a high school sports team, and I felt like the state prison was like varsity. I always made that joke before. And I'm glad that I worked in the county jail because it did give me the experience that I needed to then be good as a state prison nurse. 100%. And if you're watching this video, I still work in the prison system. When I no longer work in the prison system, I'll be pushing out a bunch of videos on prison nursing. I'm just hesitant to release those because, at least for now, because I still work there. I think it's easy for inmates, people to find me. And when you work in a prison, you gotta not put yourself out there as much, right? There's some pretty bad people in there and there's always stereotypes. I have a pretty good story about that, which I'll share later, as to why I have that mindset. I'm looking forward to that whole series, but be patient with me on that one. I have a lot to say. So this is like the early stages of the workforce for me, right? Worked in the county jail for 6 months, went to the state prison, and I've been in the state prison working as an RN ever since. So right when I got to the state prison, I worked about a year, 6 months or something like that. And then the pandemic hit and it was crazy. It was madness in the prison working during the pandemic. But, we got through the pandemic, and I would say it was about 2.5 years into the workforce when, during COVID, I was just looking for something else. I was barely hanging on. I also was looking around, right, and seeing on Reddit, a lot of nurses were like, man, I gotta quit, this thing's too much, like this thing. But then you looked around, right, during that time, And as a nurse, nothing looked good. What, you're gonna go work in a hospital where it's also just as chaotic? So as I looked, for other state nursing jobs, I found a nurse consultant position. I found that as a possibility. And then I saw how much they make, and I'm like, whoa. So for me as a prison nurse, I'll be transparent. My salary is online. You can go see it on CalCareers. I make right now $134,000, right? A nurse consultant, they can make up to like $180,000, $185,000. A lot of money. And I was like, whatever I gotta do, I'm gonna do to then get that job. Because that job, I would no longer be working on the floor in the prison, right, with inmates. I'd be working with administrative staff. I'd be working with other higher level executives and other things like that, way further removed from the bedside. I looked and saw, well, what does it take to get one of those positions, right? And this was about 2.5 years into my career. I got like a little taste of what it could be, and I just went for it. But I saw what it would take, right, to get one of those positions. Well, it takes a certain level of experience that I've been working on trying to get ever since. But it also took a master's degree. And that's why I went back to get that, right? I went back to school to get that. So now we're in the graduate student section of this video, right? So I went back to school to get my graduate degree, my MSN degree, because I want to get one of those nurse consultant positions that pay 180, 185K, right? Be further removed from the bedside, and also be able to work from home, right? A lot of those positions you get to work from home, whether it's hybrid or full-time, and I just knew I needed to go for that route, right? While I've worked in the prison, I also worked an administrative job, and I got a taste of what it felt like to work far away from the bedside. I was actually working in appeals and grievances department at the state prison, and that was awesome. That was like a perfect fit for me. I didn't have to work super close with patient inmates all the time, and it was good. But the graduate school, to be honest, it was one of the hardest things I had to do. But to me, it was worth it. And if you're asking me why'd I go to school, well, that's the reason why, is to get one of those positions. So I spent about 1.5 years trying to get that master's degree. I almost quit twice. And I say it was the hardest thing that I've ever had to do, because for me, I never liked school anyway. And now you're doing graduate level work with a big capstone project at the end and doing it in a prison setting, right? So it was challenging. It's not like a hospital where, you have all these different examples of how to do it. You're doing it in a prison where, healthcare is at a prison. A hospital is healthcare, right? So there's a difference. But ultimately I made it work. Maybe I'll make a video on that. But the main reason why I went to this school was to get and mark that box for that nurse consultant position. And I marked that box. I graduated last year in August, and it was so worth it, because now after school, right, and we'll get to this now section. So where am I at now, right? Now I graduated with my master's degree. I've gotten some of the experience that I needed, right? I worked a little bit of admin, right? Because to be a nurse consultant, you have to have some admin experience. You have to have a master's degree, and you need to be a nurse consultant or a DON or a CNE. You have to have all these type of like administrative, executive experience, or you have to be a nurse consultant for like 2 or 3 years, right? So for me, I got my master's. I tried applying for these nurse consultant positions straight up with what I had, and I didn't have enough. They said I didn't have enough and I needed more experience. So I started finding ways to get that experience. I knew it wasn't gonna be in the prison setting where I'm at, because I'm working in the clinic now. I'm working on the floor still, right? Seeing patients, and I wasn't gonna cut it. So I started exploring, and this is when I found nurse consultant entry positions, where the title just says nurse consultant. You don't get paid the big bucks like the other ones do, but it's entry level. But so you get that title of working as a nurse consultant. And I have something kind of brewing with one of them. I'm just kind of waiting out my time, and hopefully the slot falls into place. I interviewed, and I'm just waiting and waiting. State stuff takes so long. The point in sharing that with you is, once that slot falls into place and I start working in this nurse entry position, it's just a matter of working in that spot for like 2-3 years And now I have that experience that I need without having to be a DON, without having to be a supervisor, without having to be a CNE. And I can then apply for that position that I actually want, that can actually make me a lot more money, right? And I think one thing I can mention here, I totally forgot because I try to avoid the whole thing, is I did try being a supervisor at one point. They do these out of class positions where they're like temporary, you know, for like 60 days, you could do up to 120 days as a supervisor or acting in a different position. And I did that as a supervisor. And honestly, I hated it. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like it. I didn't like what it meant to have to be a supervisor. For those that are curious, try it. You'll see what I mean. Middle management is very tough, and I'll just leave it at that. Maybe I'll make a video on it at some point, but it's tough. It's very challenging, and to me, it wasn't worth throwing my personal life upside down in order to do that and get the experience. I say this because to become a nurse consultant, you can also become one with a master's degree and 2 years of a supervisory experience. I decided not to do that. So I'm going this nurse consultant route instead. So in summary, friends, right now in my career, I'm waiting to get nurse consultant experience. That's where I'm at. I'm gonna do it in the entry level so that way I can then leverage that and get to that position I want in about 2 or 3 years. And that's the route that I'm trying to take. So when you zoom out, you know, this is my path. I know there's a lot there. I was probably rambling, but this is the first time I ever kind of explained my journey, right? My story. And if anyone found anything of value in there, good. You know, I had timestamps down below, that way it's a little bit cleaner. But I think it's important for some of you guys to see like the general timeline. And if there's any questions at all that you guys have in between all this journey, right? Leave them down below, I'll get back to you. And if you have any personal questions about your own individual journey, you're just starting out, you're in the middle of school, maybe you're now working as a nurse, find me on Instagram, send me a DM, I'll get back to you. I'm here, and the main purpose why I'm here, right, is because I just want to be helpful. I just want to be helpful in the ways that I would have found helpful when I was starting this career path, and I realized that counselors, they just weren't helpful. General school counselors were not helpful for me, and probably for you, right? You may feel the same way. If you do, reach out to me, I got you. See you guys on the next one.